At a busy U.S. airport, a young mother walks through security, holding her sleeping baby. No one suspects a thing. But a retired canine named Bruno growls, sensing something deeply wrong. What the officers uncover inside the baby's diaper bag changes everything. This isn't a crime story. It's one of silent suffering, postpartum struggle, and the quiet power of being seen in time. If real, emotional stories like this speak to you, like and subscribe to follow more. What would you have done if you were there? The terminal buzzed with soft announcements and the rolling wheels of carry-ons on tile. Sarah pushed the stroller slowly, the infant inside swaddled tightly in a pale blue blanket. To anyone glancing her way, she looked like countless other young mothers. Exhausted, slightly pale, yet composed in that fragile way postpartum women often are. She wore a loose hoodie over faded jeans, her sneakers scuffed, her hair hastily tied back. If someone paid closer attention, they might have noticed her eyes. They didn't fixate, they didn't linger. They flitted, window to floor to ceiling to stroller to faraway gate numbers. As if she was somewhere else entirely. As if she wasn't sure where here even was. She paused near Terminal 4 security, took a deep breath, and checked the crumpled boarding pass in her pocket again. One ways. She hadn't bought a return. That, in itself, wasn't remarkable. Plenty of people traveled without plans to come back. But the way her hand shook when she folded the paper back into her pocket, that tremor carried a different kind of finality. The baby stirred, let out a soft coo. Sarah adjusted the corner of the blanket. "It's okay," she whispered, though it wasn't clear who she was trying to comfort. A TSA officer passed by. She flinched just slightly. Not from guilt, more like someone whose body had learned to brace at every unexpected movement. She checked the time, 11:46 a.m. Flight to Portland leaves at 12:45. She still had to get through security. Her heartbeat ticked faster. There was no turning back. She had told no one where she was going, no texts, no notes, no social media posts. Just silence, like the kind that follows a slammed door. The diaper bag slung over her shoulder looked typical. Worn canvas, a faded bare patch sewn onto the flap. Inside were the usual things. Pacifiers, a half-empty bottle, a change of clothes. And buried at the bottom, wrapped in an old receipt and tucked between folded diapers, was a single razor blade. She hadn't planned to bring it. In fact, she'd stared at it for nearly 30 minutes in the dim light of her bathroom that morning. Placed it down, picked it up, put it in the trash, took it out, washed it, dried it, wrapped it. It wasn't about wanting to hurt the child. Never. But the thought of getting on that plane, starting over alone in a city she hadn't been to since high school, felt like standing on the edge of a diving board in pitch black. What if she couldn't do it? What if she broke down mid-air, mid-life? She didn't have answers. Only the comfort of a fallback folded metal, thin and terrifying and familiar. As she shuffled forward in line, a little girl in front of her turned and pointed at the stroller. "Your baby's sleeping." Sarah smiled gently, nodded. The girl's mother gave her a tight, polite smile and shifted away. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She didn't answer. Memory flashed. 2 weeks ago, crying on the floor of her bathroom at 3 a.m. while her baby screamed in the next room. Milk spilled on her shirt. Her phone lighting up with her mother's messages. Her sister's condescension. Her ex's silence. She remembered thinking, this can't be how people live. She didn't remember deciding to buy the ticket. She just remembered holding it in her inbox, reading it again and again. Gate B9, Terminal 4. Departure 12:45 p.m. Destination unknown, but far enough. When she reached the conveyor belt at security, she placed the stroller into the designated space, gently lifting the baby into her arms. He stirred but didn't wake. The TSA officer gave her a bored nod. "Any liquids, just formula," she said quietly, gesturing to the bottle. He waved her through. She held her breath as her bag slid into the X-ray tunnel. The seconds stretched. She couldn't see the screen. She couldn't read his face. Her feet buzzed with restless static. Then the bag came through. The officer nodded. "You're good." She exhaled slowly. Her grip on the baby tightened. Her eyes darted. Farther down the concourse, past Hudson News and a Starbucks, was a canine unit she hadn't noticed yet. But he had noticed her. The soft clinking of belts and plastic trays filled the security checkpoint, a chorus of impatience and routine. Sarah moved forward with the baby in her arms. her diaper bag slung over one shoulder, a boarding pass now slightly damp from her fingers folded neatly in her back pocket. Her face was still, lips pressed together, eyes flickering from one security officer to another, not with suspicion but with quiet hyper-awareness, like someone walking on eggshells across glass. Just ahead, Officer Martinez stood beside his canine partner Bruno, a sleek black German shepherd with graying fur around the mouth. His eyes alert and unreadable. Bruno had worked JFK International for nearly 6 years, trained in narcotics, explosives, and behavioral response detection. He had never missed a mark, but even so, when he let out a soft, low growl, it surprised Martinez. It was subtle, just a vibration in the dog's chest, enough for the leash to tense and for the air between them to shift slightly. Martinez straightened, his eyes tracking Sarah as she approached. Her bag had already gone through the X-ray and nothing had pinged. No red flags, no alerts. But Bruno didn't budge. His growl deepened. Sarah, unaware of the stir behind her, was now picking up her bag, adjusting the baby in her arms as he whimpered slightly, then settled again. She stepped forward with measured calm, but Bruno moved too, one step, then another, nostrils flaring as his gaze locked on her diaper bag. "Bruno, heel," Martinez said quietly, tapping the leash twice. Normally that command reset everything, but the dog stood still. Not tense, not aggressive, just fixed. His ears twitched, his breathing slowed. Martinez narrowed his eyes and stepped forward. "Ma'am?" Sarah froze. She turned with that kind of reflexive smile people make when confronted by authority but trying not to show nerves. "Yes?" she asked. Her voice was soft, raspy, not afraid but maybe already too tired to feel afraid. Martinez nodded toward it. "Just the usual," she replied, lifting it gently and offering it. "Formula, diapers, baby wipes." "Mind if we take another look?" Martinez asked, already motioning to a nearby table. "Sure," Sarah said, but her voice cracked just slightly on the second syllable. Martinez set the bag down. Another officer, a younger woman named Green, approached quietly to assist. She began unzipping the bag with practiced neutrality, pulling items out one by one, a pacifier clipped to a cloth ribbon, a folded muslin swaddle, 2 disposable bottles, and a sealed plastic bag with diapers. Sarah watched without blinking. Bruno, however, didn't look at her. His focus remained on the bag. His nose twitched again as he stepped closer. Green opened the folded swaddle. Nothing. She moved to the plastic bag of diapers. As she touched it, Bruno let out a sharper bark, not aggressive but urgent, unmistakable. "Easy," Martinez said under his breath. Green paused. She opened the diaper bag slowly, peeled back a few clean diapers stacked neatly. At the bottom was a rolled tissue bundle, small and insignificant looking, like a crumpled receipt. Green hesitated. "What's this?" she asked. "Probably trash," Sarah murmured. Her grip on the stroller handle had turned her knuckles white. "We'll check it anyway," Green replied. She unfolded it carefully. Inside was nothing. Or rather, something too ordinary to make sense. A rusted razor blade, dulled around the edges, tucked so precisely into a seam of one diaper that even trained fingers might have missed it if not for Bruno's fixation. There was a moment where no one spoke. Martinez looked at Sarah. She didn't meet his eyes. "Ma'am, I need you to step over here for a moment," he said. His voice was still calm, procedural. Sarah obeyed wordlessly, lifting the baby against her chest like armor. The infant stirred again, his cheek brushing her collarbone. "Is there something we should know about this item?" Martinez asked. "It's not a weapon," Sarah replied too quickly, too smoothly. "It's not allowed in your carry-on," Green said. "But more importantly, why would a razor be hidden like this?" Sarah hesitated. Her eyes met Green's, just for a moment. "I didn't mean to hide it," she said quieter. "I didn't know it was there. I haven't slept much." Bruno sat beside the table now, his job technically complete, but his eyes still locked onto Sarah's hands. Green and Martinez exchanged a glance. Technically, they could detain her. It was TSA policy. But something wasn't adding up in the usual way. Bruno's behavior wasn't typical alerting. He wasn't responding to scent, at least not in the drug or explosive sense. He was responding to something else. A residual tension, a residue of intent. Martinez had seen it before. Once, during an intercept involving a woman who'd tried to end her life mid-slight with a needle she'd sewn into the lining of her scarf. The X-ray hadn't caught it, but her pulse, her movements, and her bag, the dog had felt it. "I'm going to need to make a quick report," Martinez said, his voice still even. "We may ask you a few more questions before you board." Sarah nodded, almost with relief. The baby whimpered again. "Can I sit?" "Of course." Green gestured to a bench nearby. "We'll keep you in sight." Martinez watched as Sarah walked away slowly, her arms still protectively around the baby. Bruno stood again, letting out a low exhale like he had finished his part of the conversation. Martinez knelt beside him, gave him a quiet scratch behind the ear. "What did you smell, boy?" he whispered, but Bruno didn't respond. He just looked back at the diaper bag still open on the table, as if something inside it still hadn't quite finished speaking. Officer Elena Reyes stood at the edge of the checkpoint corridor, clipboard tucked under her arm, observing the subtle disturbance surrounding Martinez and the woman with the baby. From a distance, nothing screamed threat. No yelling, no resistance, no alarms. But Bruno's persistent body language and the stiffness in the woman's posture pricked something old and deeply buried in Elena's chest. She took a slow breath, the air tinged with the sterile chill of climate control and overbrewed coffee, and stepped forward. Bruno, now seated calmly but watching the bench with unnatural stillness, shifted slightly when she approached. Martinez glanced up, gave her a brief nod. "Something?" she asked quietly, eyeing the open diaper bag now half folded in a diaper. "Might have been accidental. She's not resisting, says she didn't know it was there." "Bruno doesn't agree," Elena said, eyes narrowing. "And neither do I." She turned to Green. "Did anyone check the baby?" Green shook her head. "No signs of harm. He's asleep. Bag was clean except for the blade. No drugs, no syringes, no metal past that." Martinez nodded. "Be my guest." Elena walked slowly toward Sarah, whose back was to her now, shoulders hunched, arms tight around the baby as though absorbing the cold from the wall behind her. "Ma'am," Elena said gently, her voice low and calm. Sarah turned slightly, her eyes glassy. "Is something wrong?" she asked, but her voice was already cracked, stretched thin like glass about to shatter. "No one's in trouble," Elena said. "I'm just trying to make sure everything's okay. You seem overwhelmed." Sarah nodded vaguely, not quite in agreement, more in surrender. "I'm just tired," she whispered. "I haven't slept. I'm not bad. I'm just tired." Elena let the silence stretch, watching her closely. "I understand," she said. "I have a child too. I did." She stopped herself. A second too long, Sarah's eyes flickered to her badge, then to her face. Something passed between them, brief but magnetic. "I lost him," Elena continued quietly, "2 years ago. I know the weight you're carrying. It's heavier than people think." Sarah blinked rapidly, then closed her eyes as a tear escaped, rolling down one cheek. "I'm fine," she mumbled. "Please, don't wake him." Elena nodded. "I won't," she promised. "But I'd like to check something, not because I think you're hiding anything dangerous. Sometimes, when we're overwhelmed, we forget what we put where. Do you mind if I check the diaper inserts again, just gently? No one's going to take him from you, I promise you that." Sarah's lower lip trembled. She pulled the baby closer, tucking his blanket higher. Her voice dropped. "Please, don't. He just fell asleep. He screams when he's tired. He won't stop. I can't." Her breath caught mid-sentence, shoulders trembling now. "I can't do it again, not here, not in front of everyone." Her sob broke through like a dam splitting from the middle, too quiet to draw attention, but raw enough that Elena's hands instinctively flexed as if needing something to hold. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, we won't touch him, but will you let me take the bag again? Just the bag. I'll go through it right beside you, we'll talk through it together. Can we do that?" Sarah wiped her cheek with the back of her sleeve and nodded without speaking. Her movements were slow, uncertain, like someone walking across ice, unsure if it would crack. Elena stood and retrieved the bag, bringing it back to the bench. She sat beside Sarah this time, placing the bag gently on her lap and opening it slowly, deliberately. "You packed this yourself?" she asked gently. "Yes," Sarah said after a pause. "Last night, I think. Or this morning. "That's okay," Alina said. "What's this?" She held up a small plastic rattle. "A gift," Sarah answered. Alina asked. Watching her eyes, Sarah didn't respond. Her face stiffened. "From the hospital, was the delivery hard?" Elena asked gently. "It was fast," Sarah replied. "I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel anything at all." Elena nodded slowly, unwrapping another bundle of wipes. Her fingers worked methodically, respectful, as though handling porcelain. Brunel had shifted now, standing again, watching, not barking, not growling, but intent. "Sarah," Elena said, her tone shifting just slightly, no longer just officer to civilian, but woman to woman. "There's a razor blade in this bag, folded inside a diaper. Do you know why that might have ended up here?" Sarah shook her head, but not with confidence, more like she didn't want to think about the answer. "Used to keep one in the cabinet," she whispered. "From before. I didn't think it was still there. I didn't mean to take it, I swear. I wouldn't use it, not around him." "Okay," Elena said again. "You're not in trouble. But you understand why we need to check, right? Just to be safe?" Sarah nodded. Her tears had stopped, but her eyes were red. The baby, meanwhile, remained still, her chest rising and falling slowly. So quiet. So still. Elena reached toward the last folded cloth in the bag, something that had escaped Green's earlier sweep. As her fingers brushed the edge, Bruno tensed. Elena noticed, paused, and slowly unfolded it. Just a note. Folded tightly, edges softened from wear. She glanced at Sarah. "May I?" Sarah didn't respond. Elena opened it, handwriting barely legible. "If I can't do this anymore, please find someone who can. He deserves better than me. He deserves quiet. Not this." The bottom was unsigned. Elena exhaled through her nose and folded it shut again. She said nothing, just placed it carefully back into the cloth. Sarah was staring ahead, her hands motionless. "Do you want help, Sarah?" Elena asked quietly. "Not because we think you're a danger, because I think your dog's not alone right now and you don't have to be..." Barely. Almost invisible, but it was enough. Elena stood, her hands steady, and motioned silently toward Green in the distance to pause any escalation. Then she turned back to Sarah and sat again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm going to sit with you just a little longer. We won't do anything yet. You just sit, okay?" Sarah looked down at the baby, her hand brushing his forehead. He didn't stir. She looked as if she might ask a question, but her lips just parted slightly, then closed again. And then she looked at Elena and whispered something too quiet to catch. Elena sat beside Sarah a few minutes longer, watching her breathing begin to settle into something steadier, though it still trembled at the edges like a weak signal flickering between clarity and collapse. The baby hadn't stirred, still asleep, still peaceful, tucked in the cocoon of his mother's arms. But that, Elena knew now, meant nothing. Some babies sleep through thunderstorms, and sometimes stillness means something is desperately wrong. Officer Green approached with quiet steps, motioning Elena toward her. She lowered her voice when Elena stepped aside. "The supervisor wants to do a secondary sweep of the baby's clothing, just to be thorough. They're requesting." Elena nodded once, jaw tight. "I'll do it," she said. "We'll do it gently, let's take our time, I'll ask her." Sarah didn't object when Elena explained. Her nod was slow, her arms loosening as though each second required permission from a different part of her body. Elena gently took the baby, his warm weight surprising against her chest. She handed him to Green, who carried him toward a quieter corner partitioned for medical screenings. Elena followed. The baby stirred but didn't cry, just shifted slightly as his body adjusted to the movement. The on-call nurse, summoned minutes earlier, arrived and assisted. They laid the baby down softly on a cushioned pad under a gentle light, unwrapping the layers with the same care someone might use to open an heirloom. One by one, they removed the blanket, the swaddle, the onesie, exposing the child's small chest, arms, and belly. He squirmed briefly, let out a faint grunt, then returned to sleep. The diaper remained. Elena hesitated. "I'll do it," she whispered. The nurse nodded and stepped back. Elena unfastened the tabs with deliberate calm. When she peeled it open, her heart stopped. Folded between the soft lining and the baby's left leg, tucked almost invisibly near the crease of the thigh, was a narrow shape wrapped in what appeared to be tissue paper. She didn't move it at first, just stared. Then, slowly, With latex-gloved fingers, she lifted it. The tissue was damp at the edges from the baby's body heat. Its center darker, crinkled. She unfolded it. Inside was the blade. It wasn't new, not clean, not sterile. The metal was dull, the edges nicked, and along one corner was a dried brown smear. Rust or something worse. Blood. Old blood. Eliane's gut clenched. She looked at the nurse who was already reaching for a sealed evidence bag. Elena placed the blade inside it carefully. No one spoke. The baby was redressed quickly, gently, and returned to Sarah, who sat like a statue on the bench, arms open but eyes lost in 1,000 yards. She took the baby back without speaking. "Sarah," Elena said, crouching in front of her again. "Do you know how that blade got there?" Sarah blinked, lips trembling. "No," she said, too quickly. "I didn't. I would never hurt him. You have to believe me." "I do believe you," Elena replied quietly. "But that blade was inside the diaper, wrapped, pressed against his skin. I thought I threw it out. I thought..." "You used it," Elena said gently. "Didn't you? On yourself?" Sarah looked down, then instinctively pulled the sleeve of her hoodie over her wrist. But Elena saw the motion. "May I?" she asked. Sarah hesitated. Then slowly, almost like she was surrendering to gravity, she extended her right hand. Elena pulled the sleeve back, a faint line curved along the wrist, too clean and too recent to be old. It wasn't bleeding, not anymore, but it hadn't scabbed either. Red, tender, like a crack in porcelain still drying. "When?" Elena asked. Sarah closed her eyes. "This morning," she whispered. "Before we left, I wasn't trying to die, I just..." Her voice cracked again, thinner than tissue. "And then I looked at him, and he smiled in his sleep. And I panicked. I just packed and left." Elena didn't speak. She didn't ask why. She already knew. She had lived in that same space once, where you watch yourself from above and wonder if tomorrow has room for someone like you. "That blade was used," Elena said gently, "and it was placed against your child. Whether you meant to or not, he was at risk." "You didn't know," Sarah repeated, but softer now, almost to herself. "I thought I wrapped it in something else. I didn't think..." Her words fell apart. She buried her face in the baby's swaddle. "Please," she whispered, "don't take him." Elena sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "We're not here to punish you," she said slowly, "but we do need to be sure he's safe. And we need to make sure you're safe too. Right now, I'm more worried about you than I am about that razor." Sarah didn't respond, but her silence wasn't defensive anymore. It was hollow, resigned. Her arms tightened around the child in a way that was both maternal and desperate. Like a drowning person gripping a life preserver they're afraid will float away. Green approached again, quietly this time, and handed Elena a file. Notes from the airport medical team. Elena scanned the top page. There were other marks. Faint, old but thaw. Inner forearm. Top of the thigh. Scars that had faded under time and clothing but never intention. And with that, a bigger picture began to form. This wasn't one mistake. This was a pattern. A quiet one, a hidden one. And the line on Sarah's wrist. The child's proximity to harm. No one spoke in elevated tones. No handcuffs were drawn. This wasn't that kind of case. But across the airport, the energy had shifted. People moved slower. Something unspoken had settled over the area like a thick fog. Bruno remained still at the edge of the cordon, watching Sarah through the crowd, his eyes steady and silent, as if waiting for someone else to finally see what he had known all along. The interview room wasn't meant to feel like an interrogation chamber, but to someone like Sarah, every wall felt closer than it was, every overhead light too sharp. No pad across from her. No pad untouched, pen resting diagonally as a quiet signal. This wasn't formal yet, no cuffs, no table pounding. Just 2 chairs, a folded paper cup of water, and the echo of her own heartbeat. Sarah held her baby close, flaying slightly in her seat like she didn't even realize she was doing it. The infant was still asleep, his breath shallow and even, pressed against her chest as if he'd never noticed the world unraveling around him. Felena cleared her throat gently, just to bring attention to the space between them. "Sarah," she began, voice softer than procedure required, "can you tell me why you brought a razor blade with you today?" Sarah's eyes flicked upward, then down again, avoiding the question the way one avoids remembering a nightmare while it's still too fresh. "I told you," she murmured. "I forgot it was there." Elena waited, saying nothing. Sometimes silence dug deeper than questioning. "I wasn't trying to hurt him," Sarah added after a beat. "You would never do that. Never." "I believe you," Elena said, and meant it. "But something about how you left, how quickly you packed and came here, it feels like you were running. Were you?" Sarah hesitated. Then, with a barely perceptible nod, she said, "Yes." "From what?" Elena asked, leaning in. Sarah's jaw twitched. Her eyes glazed like something was starting to play behind them. But the film reel was skipping. "Someone," she said finally. "I was running from someone who..." Elena pressed but gently. "A partner, a relative?" Sarah shook her head slowly, biting her bottom lip. "I can't," she whispered. "He'll find out." "We can help keep you safe," Elena assured her. "But we need to know who..." Sarah pressed her lips together until they turned white. "It's not safe to say," she said. "Not here, not anywhere." Elena studied her carefully. The cadence of Sarah's voice didn't match someone lying. It matched someone who had lived in fear long enough to rehearse silence. But something still didn't track. She jotted a quick note on her pad. Not a statement, just a word, disassociation, and moved on. "When did you decide to leave?" she asked. "This morning," Sarah replied. "I woke up, I looked around, and I just knew I couldn't stay another day. It was like everything in the apartment was shrinking, the walls, the air. Even the light felt like it wanted to push me out. And you came straight here? I booked the ticket around 6. I didn't even shower. Just packed and called a cab." Elena nodded slowly. "Did you see him this morning?" "Who?" Sarah asked too quickly. Elena let the moment stretch before answering. "The person you're running from." Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. She looked down at her child. "No," she said, too quietly. "But I heard him." Elena scribbled another note. Then she stood. "Okay," she said. "I'll be back soon." She stepped out, leaving the door cracked behind her just slightly. Officer Martinez was waiting down the hall, with a USB stick in hand. "Footage from the main lot," he said. Pulled her arrival timestamp from the boarding pass purchase. She got dropped off at 8:12 a.m. Taxi, yellow cab, number 6089. Solo passenger, no trailing vehicle, no loiterers before or after, and no one followed her in on foot either. "So, no one," Elena confirmed. "Correct." The camera caught the cab pulling away, then 30 seconds later she enters through gate. Elena's jaw clenched subtly. "Show me." They walked into the small observation room where a screen displayed paused footage in crisp monochrome. Martinez clicked play. A taxi rolled in through the far entrance, slowed and parked crooked near the curb. Sarah stepped out in one fluid motion, paper bag over shoulder, stroller unfolded with a single practiced motion, baby already buckled in. Her movements were quick but not panicked, focused, automatic. She looked over her shoulder once, as if checking for something, but the rear window of the cab reflected nothing except concrete and sky. She didn't linger. She didn't fumble. She didn't seem like someone afraid of pursuit. She seemed like someone afraid of stillness. "No one's behind her?" Elena asked again, squinting. "No one, nothing, not even a parked car for blocks." "She lied," Martinez said, crossing his arms. Elena didn't answer immediately. "No," she said eventually. "I think she told the truth as far as she understood it." Martinez gave her a puzzled look. "You think she imagined it?" "I think the person she's running from might not be real, not in the way we think." She paused, then added, "But the fear is, that's real, that part is very, very real." Martinez didn't argue. Elena stood for a moment, watching the last few seconds of footage again as Sarah disappeared into the terminal, her figure shrinking into the current of passengers. "Did she give you a name?" "No," Elena replied. "She wouldn't. She said he'll find out. He wishes..." "You're requesting apartment records now. Kid looks healthy," Martinez added. "Not malnourished, not bruised. So at least she's doing that part right." Elena gave him a flat look. "She's drowning, James." "Drowning people can hold their children close right up until they slip under." Martinez nodded once and walked out. Elena stayed behind a beat longer, staring at the frozen frame on screen, Sarah's face barely visible in the side mirror of the cab, pale and wide-eyed, but not watching traffic. Watching something else. Watching nothing. Or someone only she could see. When Elena returned to the interview room, her mouth opening and closing in that rhythmic way infants do when searching for dreams of comfort. Elena sat again. "We checked the cameras," she said softly. "No one followed you, Sarah. You came here alone." Sarah's body tensed, but she said nothing. Elena leaned forward slightly. "I think you believe you're in danger. I think something in your past makes it feel that way. But today, right now, no one is chasing you." Sarah finally looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, but somewhere inside them, a flicker of confusion bloomed. "You don't know him," she said, barely above a whisper. "He doesn't have to follow. He's already there." Elena's pen hovered over the notepad again, paused. "Where?" Didn't blink. "In my head," she said. "Sometimes in the mirror. Sometimes in my sleep. Sometimes just breathing too close. Like the room is full of him." Elena didn't write anything down. She just exhaled quietly and waited, hoping Sarah would say more. And she almost did. Her lips parted like a door beginning to open. Elena left the room quietly, closing the door behind her with a soft click, then made her way toward the adjacent medical wing, where a nurse practitioner named Carla was finishing an intake report. Carla had just completed a basic assessment of Sarah's vitals and visible health indicators during a brief examination conducted with Sarah's consent. The report was concise, but its implications were heavy. "He's postpartum," Carla said, not looking up from the clipboard. "Looks like 6, maybe 7 weeks out. C-section based on the surgical scar. Healing okay physically, but she's underweight, dehydrated, and her sleep cycle is off. Badly." "Has she seen a doctor recently?" Elena asked. Carla shook her head. "No follow-up appointments on record that we could verify. No pediatric records either, which means she's flying solo." Elena rubbed her temples slowly. "Any signs of self-harm, besides what you already saw?" Carla flipped a page. "There's more. Faded marks, upper thigh, inner arm. They're old. Maybe a year or more. But recent behavior suggests relapse. She's disassociated. Emotionally flattened. The way she responded to touch during the exam? She flinched every time we moved too close. Classic symptoms of postpartum depression. But this is beyond moderate. I'd call it clinical. Any risk indicators? Suicidal ideation? Potentially. Not vocalized, but it's written all over her behavior." Carla handed Elena a sealed plastic evidence pouch. This was at the bottom of her handbag, folded between a receipt and an old bottle of baby Tylenol. "I figured you'd want to read it." Elena took the pouch without a word. Inside was a sheet of notebook paper, yellowed at the edges and folded 3 times. She opened it carefully, smoothing out the creases. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, written in dark blue ink that had bled slightly along the fibers of the page. "To my baby," it began. "If one day you're reading this, it means I couldn't do it. Not the way I was supposed to. Not like a mother should. I love you. I loved you every single second, even the ones when I wanted to disappear. This isn't your fault. It's never been your fault. I just can't figure out how to be enough for you and still survive myself. If someone kind finds this, please tell my baby that I tried. I tried so hard." Elena stood motionless, the paper trembling in her hand. She reread the last line twice, then folded it back into the pouch and sealed it without a word. "She never gave it to anyone," Carla said quietly. "Maybe she never meant to. But writing it meant something." Elena nodded, her thoughts spiraling. She walked slowly back toward the observation room, her pace slowing with every step. As she passed the hallway that led to airport security offices, she glimpsed the wall of monitors where various terminal views were streaming in silent real time. On one of the screens, Sarah sat motionless, still clutching her baby, rocking slightly as though it were the only rhythm she remembered from her former life. Elena entered the small back office that had become their temporary coordination hub. Martinez was there, along with Green and a representative from Child Protective Services, a woman named Dana who had just arrived and was reviewing early reports. Elena held up the pouch. "He wrote a letter," she said quietly. "Didn't send it, but it reads like a goodbye." Dana looked up. "How recent?" "Ink still wet, maybe this morning," Elena said. "You think she intended to harm herself?" "No," Elena said after a moment. I think she was preparing for the possibility that she wouldn't make it through the day without giving up. Dana exhaled sharply, then took the file Martinez handed her. Your official history of mental illness on paper, but unofficially this is classic. She's isolated, unstable, overwhelmed. And she didn't ask for help? No support system? Green asked. Elena shook her head. Not that we can confirm. No calls made, no emergency contacts listed on the booking. She bought the ticket from a borrowed laptop at a cafe, paid cash. She planned this. Elena looked down at the sealed pouch again. The thing is, she said, this wasn't meant for us. This was her backup plan, just in case. Dana stood, smoothing the creases in her blouse. We'll need to notify the local Department of Family Services in her county. If there's no immediate family to intervene, temporary guardianship could be established. Can we wait? Elena asked, voice tightening. She's holding on barely. If we take the child now, we might lose her completely. Dana raised an eyebrow. You think she's stable? No, Elena admitted. I think she wants to be. Dana nodded slowly. We'll tread lightly then. Observation hold, medical support, psychiatric assessment. No separation unless the child is in immediate danger. Thank you, Elena said quietly. Back in the interview room, Sarah still hadn't moved. The letter remained unbraided hands. She hadn't asked about the blade again. She hadn't asked why they'd stopped questioning her. She was simply there, body present, soul flickering in and out. Elena entered the room again, this time without the badge showing. She pulled up the chair, sat down across from her, and didn't say anything. For a full minute, they just breathed. Then Sarah spoke. You didn't want to write it, she said. I didn't want to think about the words. But I needed, if I was gone, I needed him to know I wasn't a monster. Elena nodded slowly. You're not, she said. You're sick, and you're scared, but that doesn't make you a monster. He doesn't cry around strangers, Sarah whispered. It makes it easier for people to believe I'm fine, but when it's just me and him, she trailed off. He cries? Elena asked. Non-stop, Sarah said. Like he knows I don't have the answers, like he wants someone better, someone warmer. Babies cry because they can't speak yet, Elena replied. That's how they say they need something, not that they want someone else. Sarah didn't respond. She looked down at the child in her arms. I wanted to be that someone, she said. I really did. Her eyes closed briefly, lips tightening. But some mornings I stare at the wall for 2 hours and can't remember how to pick up a spoon. Elena stayed quiet. No advice, no corrections, just presence. And slowly, as if afraid the room might vanish, Sarah reached into her bag again, pulled out a second piece of paper, this one not folded, just crumpled. You wrote this last week, she said. I didn't finish it. It was supposed to be a plan, but I couldn't follow through. She passed it to Elena, who scanned the first lines quickly. It was a list, a grocery list, a schedule, a line that read, wake up, feed baby, brush teeth. Don't cry before 9 a.m. Elena looked up. Sarah was watching her. Is that crazy? She asked. No, Elena said. It's honest. While Sarah sat in the quiet of the interview room, her baby cradled in her arms, and her thoughts folding in on themselves like pages of a worn diary, Elena stood before the records terminal in a back office, the screen casting a pale light onto her tense face. Dana had pulled a few threads with county services, and within minutes, the fragments of Sarah's history began stitching together into a shape far more fragile than anyone had guessed. Found it, Dana murmured, reading aloud from the file she had just opened. Sarah Lorraine M., born in 1995. Prior psychiatric hold 12 months ago, following emergency admittance at Riverside General. Admittance for what? Elena asked, already dreading the answer. Postpartum psychosis. Acute. She was 27 weeks pregnant. Went into labor unexpectedly. Baby didn't survive more than 20 minutes. They put her on a 72-hour psychiatric hold, then extended to 6 days under California WIC 5150. Elena exhaled, eyes fixed on the screen. Any notes from the psychiatrist? Dana clicked into the evaluation. Severe dissociation. Hallucinations tied to infant presence. She kept waking in the hospital asking for the child, even after they explained multiple times that the baby had passed. Eventually stabilized with medication. Discharged with outpatient support plan. No follow-up visits recorded. She dropped off their radar 2 weeks later. Jesus, Martinez muttered from the corner, his arms folded. She never had a chance to start healing. Did she have a partner? Elena asked. Dana scrolled through the intake sheet. Married at the time. Jason M. filed for separation 3 weeks after her release. Did he stay during the hospitalization? According to the social worker's note, visited twice. Stopped answering calls after that. Moved out the following month. Do we know where he is now? Dana shook her head. A recent address. Looks like he moved states. Colorado, maybe. There's a partial record from a lease application there. No custody filings. No visitation logs. No contact since. Elena leaned back against the wall, the back of her head gently tapping the drywall in a steady, slow rhythm. She processed. She went through that, and then got pregnant again within a year? Looks that way, Dana said. Break different father. No name listed. Birth certificate shows father unknown. So she's been alone, Elena murmured, since she lost her first child, abandoned by the father, dropped by the system, and now raising an infant in God knows what conditions. She's not just raising him, Dana added. She's surviving him. Every minute. Elena thought back to the letter, the smudged ink, the apology so desperately folded in on itself, and the list Sarah had written with quiet heartbreak. Don't cry before 9 a.m. She had been keeping herself alive by fragments. Martinez approached, phone in hand. We got access to her rental records. She's been living in a one-acre apartment in East Baldwin. Utilities are in her name. Rent's been late 5 out of the last 6 months. No reports filed from the landlord. No complaints. But no visitors either. Building has no concierge. No cameras. She's invisible. No support network. Elena asked again. No church, no family, no community groups. Dana shook her head. Not from what we've pulled. Emergency contacts all blank. One reference listed from the past. Her sister, but that number's out of service. And she did all this, caring for a newborn, after losing a child and never processing it. Elena's voice cracked slightly on the last part. She remembered what Carla had said earlier. The scar from the C-section still healing, sleep-deprived, malnourished. But now the context was different. The pain wasn't new, it had never ended. It had just evolved. I want to go back in, Dana said. She deserves to know that someone finally sees the full story. Do it gently, Dana advised. We're still evaluating for involuntary hold, but if we can keep her grounded voluntarily, it's better for both of them. Elena nodded and returned to the room, pausing outside the door for a moment, collecting herself. When she stepped inside, Sarah looked up immediately. Her eyes didn't widen, but they glistened, as if some part of her had been bracing for judgment. Elena sat down slowly. Sarah, she began softly, we've gone through a few things. We know about Riverside, about what happened last year. Sarah didn't flinch. She blinked once, then stared down at her baby's forehead, her hand gently stroking his fine hair. I thought they burned those records, she said. I was told they were confidential. They are, Elena said. But they show us what you've been through, what you're still carrying. Sarah let out a slow, fragile exhale. You're going to take him away now? No, Elena said immediately. That's not what this is about. Right now, I want to understand. You lost a child. Then the man you were with walked away. And you never got help after that, did you? Sarah shook her head. Help doesn't come unless you scream. And I didn't know how to scream without sounding dangerous. So you stayed quiet? Yes. Elena leaned in slightly. Did you plan to hurt yourself today? No, Sarah whispered. I didn't plan to be okay either. What about the baby? Never, she said fiercely. Not him. He's the only reason I'm still here. But he's also the reason I feel like I'm not allowed to break down. Because if I fall apart, then he has no one. He has you, Elena said gently. Even broken, even tired, even scared. He has you. Sarah looked up again, her lips trembling. He doesn't deserve that version of me. He doesn't need perfection, Elena replied. He needs truth and safety. And someone who wants to try. Sarah's face folded inward, like something inside her was being pulled toward the center and collapsing all at once. I never stopped seeing the first one, she said. Even now. Sometimes I see his outline in the bassinet at night. I close my eyes and he's there. Not moving, not crying. just waiting. Elena let that silence hold. Then, very slowly, she reached across the table and placed her hand flat on the surface. That grief doesn't make you unfit, it makes you human. Sarah said nothing, but her eyes filled again, and this time, she didn't blink it away. The baby stirred in her arms and let out a soft sigh. For a moment, both of them, mother and child, just breathed. Later that day, Elena stepped away from the chaos of forms, reports, and the ambient buzz of low-level crisis management to clear her head. Her fingers itched with a familiar restlessness, one that came not from uncertainty but from knowing there was something she had missed. She went back into the database, not the federal one this time, but the local child services archives, just to look for any trace that might offer another layer to Sarah's story. Something buried in routine paperwork, forgotten by most but often revealing more than any interrogation. It didn't take long. Elena found it under Temporary Voluntary Separation Request Parent Initiated. The application was dated 5 weeks ago. Sarah M. had filed a request to surrender temporary custody of her infant son to the county for a period not exceeding 30 days, citing exhaustion, emotional distress, and inability to maintain safe caregiving standards. The form was signed in a shaky hand, with a note attached. Please understand this is not abandonment. I just need a breath, just a moment to find my legs again. But what made Elena freeze wasn't the application itself. It was the withdrawal request, submitted exactly 3 days later. No explanation, no commentary, just a single-sentence form rescinding the petition. I've changed my mind. I want him home. I can do this. Please return my son. Elena sat back in her chair, breath shallow. This woman had come to the edge and stepped back. She had walked to the brink of losing him by choice, not because she didn't care, but because she did so much it became unbearable. And then something, some spark, some ache, some whisper had pulled her away from that ledge. She closed the files and stood. In her chest something shifted, more than empathy, a kind of reverence. Sarah wasn't a case. She was a survivor. And she hadn't just survived for herself. She had done it for someone who couldn't speak yet, but needed her louder than anyone else ever had. Moments later, with the support of CPS and a hospital social worker, Elena arranged a private room, neutral, quiet, soft lit, so Sarah could be with her baby alone. It wasn't procedural. It wasn't protocol. But it was human. When they led Sarah to the room, she looked unsure, like someone being offered a second chance she wasn't convinced she had earned. Her steps were slow and her hands kept clenching, releasing, clenching again. Elena walked beside her but didn't speak. The door opened with a soft mechanical click. Inside, a warm blanket lay draped over the hospital cot, where her baby was swaddled and breathing steadily, eyes still closed in sleep. No monitors, no questions, just a mother and her child in the same room. Without fear, Sarah stopped in the doorway, her breath hitching so violently Elena almost reached out to steady her. But Sarah held her ground. She stepped inside. Elena waited a moment before closing the door gently behind her. From the small observation pane they could watch, but only if necessary. No surveillance, no tape, just witness. The moment Sarah sat down beside the cot, her knees gave slightly, as if something inside her legs had softened with the sudden permission to rest. She looked at her baby, truly looked, not through the lens of anxiety or survival or fear, but with the raw, startled tenderness of someone realizing they are still needed. Her hands hovered above the blanket at first, then slowly, reverently, she pulled him close. The baby stirred, eyes fluttering briefly before drifting shut again, mouth twitching in a dreamlike reflex. Sarah's arms wrapped around him, and for a second, she just breathed him in. His scent, his warmth, the delicate weight of him against her chest. Then the sob came. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent. It was soft and cracked open from the center, like the hush of a glass splintering under pressure. Her body shook with it, not because of grief, but because of something deeper, recognition. Not just of her baby, but of herself. She wasn't gone. She wasn't a shell. She was still in there, alive, present, holding on to something that tethered her to this earth in the way no medication or crisis protocol ever could. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his hair, her voice barely audible through the sobs. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know I was still here." The baby stirred again, a small fist pressing into her collarbone. Her arms tightened, not in desperation, but in grounding. She wasn't just cradling him. She was rocked gently, as if reminding her own heart of its rhythm. Behind the glass, Elena stood in silence, arms crossed, jaw tight. Dana stepped up beside her. "That form," Elena said quietly. "The voluntary separation one, she rescinded it." "I saw," Dana replied. "She tried to walk away, then she didn't." "Because of him," Elena murmured. "Because somehow, even in the middle of the fog, she remembered love." Dana nodded slowly. "You don't see that often. Usually it's a call from a neighbor, a tip, a crisis too late, but she asked for space before anything broke. And no one answered," Elena said bitterly. "Until now." They stood there a moment longer, watching Sarah rock back and forth with a softness no longer rooted in fear, but in return. Like something inside her had finally circled back and clicked into place. Dana finally spoke. "If she agrees to monitored care and postpartum support, we can move forward without removing custody." "She'll agree," Elena said. "She's been begging for help in silence for months. We're just finally listening." Inside the room, Sarah looked down at her child, tears still marking her cheeks but no longer falling. Her expression was different now. Not relieved, not proud, just awake. By early evening, the airport had returned to its ordinary hum. Overhead announcements blending with rolling luggage wheels, boarding calls echoing off the polished walls, and travelers moving past the morning's incident with the obliviousness only strangers could afford. But inside the small conference room now reserved for active case coordination, something quieter, heavier, and far more human was unfolding. Elena sat at the head of the table with Dana beside her, while Dr. Leland, a trauma-informed clinical psychologist on emergency consult, scanned Sarah's file with a brow furrowed in quiet recognition. He was in his late 40s, eyes kind but sharp, the kind of gaze that saw through rehearsed confessions and scripted apologies. "We're not looking at a danger to others case," he said calmly. "We're looking at a mother on the edge of psychic collapse." The razor blade wasn't placed with intent to harm her child. It was a coping object. Dangerous, yes, but symptomatic of unmanaged trauma, not violence. Dana tapped her pen thoughtfully against the folder. "He qualifies for a 72-hour psychiatric hold under 5150, she said. "But this wouldn't be custodial. We'd be moving her to the Crisis Stabilization Unit at Cedar Lake Medical, not a jail." Elena nodded, relief flickering behind her eyes. "She's been through enough confined rooms." "I'll go speak with her myself," Dr. Leland offered. "Based on everything you've gathered, her history, her withdrawal of the separation request, the visible regret, the consistency of her story, I believe she's a viable candidate for rehabilitation with integrated mother-baby care." "You're thinking residential?" Dana asked. "Eventually, yes," he said. "But for now, 72-hour crisis admission with concurrent parenting support recommendations. She's more likely to respond if she doesn't feel punished." "The baby?" Elena asked. Dana opened a separate folder. "We've arranged immediate temporary placement with one of our certified emergency foster families. It's not separation in the traditional sense, more like structured respite, just until we know Sarah is medically stable. The caregivers are trained to support reunification cases, and the placement is within 5 miles of Cedar Lake." "Will Sarah be allowed visits?" "Within the first 48 hours if her care team permits," Dana said. "And if Dr. Leland deems her emotionally fit enough not to destabilize." Elena exhaled deeply, then looked over at the window where dusk was painting streaks of orange across the walls. "Tell her gently," she said. "She's going to hear this as abandonment unless we frame it right." Dr. Leland stood, adjusted the cuffs of his shirt and nodded. "I've been doing this long enough to know which words cut deeper than silence." He entered the private room where Sarah sat with her baby resting in her lap. The infant's breaths now synced to her own, a small miracle of regulation, achieved not through medicine but proximity. She looked up at the unfamiliar man, and her body instinctively tensed. "Are you here to take him?" she asked before he'd spoken a word. "No," Dr. Leland said gently, taking the seat across from her. "I'm here to make sure you don't disappear." Her eyes filled instantly. "They told me someone would come," she whispered, "but they never said what kind of someone." "I'm not here to judge," he said. "I'm here because you've been drowning, and because people who drown quietly often go unnoticed until it's too late." Sarah looked down at her son. "He deserves you," Leland corrected. But the version of you that isn't fighting to stay upright with every breath. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "So what now? We make a plan," he said. "You'll come with me to Cedar Lake Medical. It's not a prison, it's a place where you can sleep safely, eat without panic, and talk without hiding. It's where we help you remember who you are underneath all this noise." "And him?" Her voice cracked. "I can't be away from him. I already failed once. He's being cared for, near you, by a licensed family. It's temporary, not because you're a danger, but because your healing matters too." Sarah held the baby tighter, kissed the top of his head. "I don't want him to think I left like the others did." "Then we'll make sure he doesn't," Leland promised. "This isn't goodbye. This is breathing room." She nodded slowly, then looked down at her son one last time before allowing a nurse to carefully lift him from her arms. It wasn't violent, it wasn't traumatic. It was sacred in its softness. Two women exchanging the care of something precious. Not because one failed, but because one finally asked for help. Elena watched from the hallway, eyes wet, jaw clenched. Dana stood beside her, clipboard lowered. "We'll put Sarah into the mother-baby stabilization track," she confirmed. "First week will be monitored. If all goes well, reunification planning begins before discharge. And the baby? Placed tonight, monitored daily, emotional notes logged for early attachment tracking. It's not ideal, but it's not separation. It's survival with dignity." Elena finally let herself exhale. "Thank you," she said, "for not making her into a statistic." Dana smiled faintly. "She made that choice herself. We just didn't get in the way." As Sarah was wheeled toward the transport unit, her eyes drifted to the tiny bundle in the arms of the foster nurse. Their gazes didn't meet. He was too young to understand what was happening, but something in her body responded anyway. A tightening, a promise, a prayer. She would come back. Not from the airport, not from the interview room, from herself. The courtroom wasn't grand. It wasn't the kind of place people imagined when thinking about second chances. The ceiling was low, the paint just slightly too pale, and the chairs were mismatched from budget cuts no one had bothered to fix. But that morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows with almost deliberate precision, casting soft beams across the floor like a gentle spotlight. Sarah sat in the front row, wearing a simple blue dress and a soft cream cardigan that hung comfortably around her shoulders. Her hair was washed, pulled back neatly, and her eyes, once glassy and detached, were now focused, aware, and above all calm. She looked straight ahead, not because she had to, but because she could. There was no trembling in her hands, no darting glances toward the exit. In her lap sat a slim folder, medical clearances, therapy reports, and a printed schedule of her ongoing support sessions. Every sheet was a testament she hadn't just survived, she had committed to healing, to structure, to motherhood, to herself. Beside her sat Officer Elena, still in uniform, though her presence today was less about duty and more about solidarity. She hadn't missed a week. Every Thursday she'd visited Sarah at Cedar Lake, sometimes just sitting with her, other times walking her through parenting exercises or journaling prompts. It wasn't part of her job description, it was just something she did because it felt right. At her feet, lying calmly with his chin on his paws, was Bruno, the canine officer who had changed everything. He was no longer wearing his harness. Instead, he wore a simple red collar with a brass tag that read, "Retired." His eyes scanned the room with measured curiosity. But he didn't flinch or growl. Not today. Not with her. The judge, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes and a reputation for directness, glanced over the file before speaking. "Mrs. M," she said, her voice even, "your case has been reviewed by the Family Services Board, the Psychiatric Panel, and the Child Welfare Advocate. All reports indicate significant progress, compliance, and a demonstrable desire to reunify." Sarah nodded once, firmly. "Your child has been in temporary foster care with the intention of reunification. He's healthy, responsive, and continues to show signs of secure attachment. Do you understand what's required of you going forward?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sarah said. Her voice was steady, deliberate. "Ongoing therapy, home visits, and parenting group attendance. I've already enrolled for the next 12 weeks. The judge looked over the rim of her glasses. "And why do you believe you're ready now?" Sarah looked down for a moment. Not out of shame, but thoughtfulness. "Because 6 weeks ago, I didn't think I deserved him," she said. And now I know I don't need to be perfect. I just need to be honest, present, and willing, and I am. Every single day. There was a brief silence, heavy in its weight. Then the judge nodded. The court finds sufficient cause to approve the reunification plan, effective immediately. Your son will be returned to your custody under monitored transition for the next 30 days. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Elena placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Bruno lifted his head, sensing the shift. The judge continued. He's one additional matter. The K9 unit has submitted a retirement request for Bruno due to a minor but chronic joint issue. Though not disabling, it makes him less effective in active patrol. However, per the team's recommendation, and I quote, "It seems only fitting that Bruno retires to the one person he insisted on protecting the most." She smiled faintly. Do you accept responsibility for his care?" Sarah looked at Bruno, and something in her chest unlocked. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd be honored." The courtroom clerk stepped forward with a small packet of transfer documents and a red leash coiled carefully in her hand. Sarah stood and accepted them with quiet gratitude. As the room began to empty, Dana approached with a smile. "Your son's already on his way," she said. "They'll meet you at the family center this afternoon." Sarah's breath caught again, but this time it was joy that shook her, not fear. Elena turned to her, a rare softness overtaking her usually sharp features. "You saved yourself, you know," she said. "Bruno might have barked first, but you were the one who turned around." Sarah knelt beside Bruno and clipped the leash gently to his collar. He stood slowly, leaning slightly into her touch, tail wagging once, slow and sure. She looked at him and said, softly but with certainty, "We saved each other." They stepped outside into the crisp light of afternoon, the air carrying the scent of spring and far-off jet fuel from the nearby airport. It smelled like beginnings. Sarah held Bruno's leash in one hand and her folder in the other. For the first time in a long time, both felt like anchors, not burdens. When they reached the sidewalk, Bruno paused and looked up at her, waiting. "Come on," she said with a smile. "We've got someone to pick up." She walked forward, steady, eyes open, spine tall. Behind her, Elena watched them go, then turned and disappeared into the courthouse hallway, quietly, respectfully, like someone closing the final page of a story worth remembering. If this story touched you, consider liking and subscribing to follow more powerful, real-life inspired stories like this. Which moment stayed with you the most? Was it Bruno's instinct, Sarah's quiet breakdown, or the final courtroom scene? And where are you watching this from? Drop your thoughts in the comments, we'd love to know.